very good friend of mine, Ron Moser. Good afternoon. I'm the Rusk County Veteran Service Officer. I started about 3 years ago, and
Tell them what day, Ron.
April 1st. I had to pinch myself to see if is this a joke or what? But and I've been fighting a real bad cough, so excuse me, but it's going away finally. But I've really enjoyed the job. It's very rewarding in all aspects. I had some high school kids come up and on County Government Day, and 3 of them came in to see an overview of my job, and I was telling them about all the good things, and they said, well, tell us one bad thing about this job. I guess that's probably the worst thing that happens is when a veteran puts in a claim and they don't get what they want. That's probably the worst thing that happens in this job. Other than that, just helping people. I've done that all my life. I spent 24 years in the Air Force, and I ended up my last 12 years in a helping situation with Air Force Aid, writing out checks for needy soldiers and airmen. And that started the rewarding type job, and that was just so cool to be able to help people when they had to go home on emergency leave, or if they needed extra food or car repair. And now and before I came here, I was in credit counseling, helping people with their credit problems. That's a whole new ball of wax, I'll tell you. You don't want that kind of a problem. And now I'm here helping veterans. And every once in a while, a young guy comes in and says, how do I join the military? Well, I show them the ways to the recruiter's office, and they take them from there. And it's just very rewarding when somebody comes in and they're in need, and they get what they want, and they get what they need, and that's the biggest thing. But what do they get? The biggest thing that I'm working with is getting people enrolled in the medical with the VA. And with people losing their jobs, getting laid off, can't afford to pay medical insurance anymore, the VA medical care is a big lifesaver. And that's probably the biggest thing that I'm into right now, is signing up people for the medical care. And the other things that I help them with are their claims. I have people claims, especially the young guys coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan. They have a laundry list of things that have happened to them, anywhere from IED explosions, PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, any hearing losses, bone injuries. You know, they have to wear armor over there that's over 125 pounds. And when you get jumping out of a vehicle, and that's hard on your knees and your back and your shoulders. And these guys are just coming back with just all kinds of injuries. And we sit down and put in a claim. We just write it all out and file the papers, and then they have to go into the medical facility in Minneapolis for their physicals. It's called a compensation and pension claim. And then in the end, hopefully the veteran gets their goal is to get some compensation, hopefully, or at least the medical attention they need to get the help they need for their injuries. And I have one guy, just as an example, it's kind of amusing in some cases, but he's an old World War II veteran. He's about 84 years old, and he came in and he just says, I can't hear too much anymore. So we put in a claim that he came back at 80% service connected for hearing loss, just on his first try. And that means he has a very severe hearing loss, but now he's going to be compensated with monetary compensation and free hearing aids for the rest of his life. He said his wife probably doesn't appreciate it that much now, but now he's compensated. I want to touch a little bit on some of the things that the Vietnam veterans have seen change in their compensation. specifically Agent Orange. And that was a defoliant they used during the Vietnam War. And it's just so devastating as to what contamination can do. I've had guys that come in and say that they were in the jungles fighting and they hear the planes overhead and all of a sudden they're soaking wet. Because the planes just dropped all that defoliant from the air and they had to live with that for up to a week without a shower, without anything. And now when they find out what's really happening with all this, there's cancers, there's diabetes, so many different things that can happen from that exposure. And this is one of the biggest things that the VA has finally assumed, that this is a presumptive illness now. If you've got boots on the ground in Vietnam and you come up with diabetes or certain types of lung cancer, it's presumed that you've been in contact with Agent Orange and you are going to get compensation for that. And the quickest one that I have seen ever was from the time I started the paperwork until he was cleared at 100% was 5 hours. I faxed it right into them along with the medical records, and the VA just walked it right through and said, this is a bad one, and they got it approved that same day. He was rated at 100%. The sad part is that he died 2 days later. But now, since he had that on his record with the VA, his widow is going to get compensated for the rest of her life with dependency indemnity compensation. That's a tough one to say. But as long as that was on his record through the VA, his surviving spouse is now going to be covered for the rest of her life with compensation through the VA. Most of them are not that severe. That was the worst one I've ever seen. But it's very important that if you know of a veteran that is suffering from any kind of type 2 diabetes, mellitus, or any kind of cancers, and if they had boots on the ground in Vietnam, have them come in to see me. I just can't emphasize that enough. And as far as any veteran from any wartime situation, if they have a hearing loss or ringing in the ears or any kind of injury, have them come in. I won't refuse anybody. It's not up to me to decide what they're going to get. It's my job to get that paperwork in the appropriate place in the VA and let the VA do their work on it. And that's been one of my goals, is to just get everything in as fast as I can. And even if I don't think it's going to be a good claim, that's not my decision. I'm going to get it into the VA immediately. So, and it's just interesting hearing a lot of good stories from the veterans. And we have some that are kind of comical, some that are very tragic. But a big part of my job is listening to people talk. And some of those guys have some wonderful stories to tell about how they made it through World War II or the Korean War or Vietnam War. And it's just amazing. I look at my 24 years in the Air Force, and it was nothing compared to what some of these guys did in 12 to 18 months of service for their country during the time of war. So I just can't emphasize enough, if you know anybody, have them come in to see us, and we'll get them going on the right track. Does anybody have any questions?